You're here for the deep ocean, specifically for what lives there, and for why the creatures get less recognizable the further down you go. That is exactly what this is. Over the course of this documentary, we descend from the sunlit surface all the way to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, moving through zones of increasing darkness and pressure. And at each level, the creatures waiting there are stranger, more extreme, and harder to explain than anything in the zone above. The deep sea doesn't just get darker as you descend, it gets weirder in ways that follow a clear pattern, and understanding that pattern changes how you see the planet you live on. Right now, as you listen to this, something is moving in the dark 6,000 feet below the nearest ocean. You will never see it. Most scientists haven't either. The creature living there has no name, no entry in any database, and no awareness that anything like you exists above it. It has been there in complete darkness, at temperatures just above freezing, under pressure that would flatten a car, for longer than your entire civilization has existed. And here is what's strange. That creature is not the exception. It is the rule. The ocean you think you know, the blue one from every photograph and every documentary, covers barely 5% of what the ocean actually is. What lies beneath that familiar surface is a different world entirely, and the deeper you descend into it, the less it resembles anything that life on land prepared you to understand. There is an image most people have memorized without ever trying. It is the photograph taken by the Apollo 17 crew in 1972. Earth, suspended in black space, wrapped in white clouds, soaked in blue. Every ocean documentary, every nature program, every classroom poster starts with that image or something close to it. The ocean is blue, alive, and familiar. We track whale migration routes across the Pacific, map coral reefs in the Caribbean, follow tuna populations across seasons, and watch dolphins from research boats, like we understand the sea in any meaningful way. We have named the storms that form over it. We have sailed every mapped route across it. For most of human history, the ocean has been the thing we look at, visible, studied, broadly charted, and broadly understood. That familiarity is not an accident. It is built over centuries of surface-level contact, fishing, trading, exploring coastlines and shallow reefs, all of it happening in the very top layer of a system that descends, in places, to nearly 7 miles below. But here is the problem with that familiarity. Everything we have ever learned about the ocean, every mapped route, every documented species, every reef survey, every migration path, applies to the top 200 meters of water. That is the sunlit zone, the layer where light penetrates deeply enough to support photosynthesis, and it represents roughly 1% of the ocean's total volume. The remaining 99% is a vertical column of water descending through darkness so complete that no surface light has ever touched it. No camera has documented most of it, and no existing classification system has named the majority of what lives there. Scientists estimate the ocean holds somewhere between 700,000 and 2 million species. We have formally described roughly 250,000. The gap between what we have found and what exists is not a minor oversight. It is a systematic blind spot built from centuries of studying only the surface of a system we assumed we understood. We named the ocean. We drew the coastlines and charted the currents and called it explored. But the entire time we were reading the label on a jar we had never once opened. Therefore, that familiar blue image of Earth from space is not showing you Earth. It is showing you the exception, a thin sun-touched surface that makes up barely 5% of the ocean's total volume. The actual Earth, the real one, is 95% black, permanent, cold, crushing. And the creatures living in that 95% have never once seen sunlight, never once needed it, and have been building some of the strangest bodies in the history of life because of it. We didn't discover most of them. We found fragments. Every time a submersible descends, it comes back with something that rewrites a biology textbook, not occasionally, but routinely. The deep sea doesn't give up its secrets slowly. It just waits, in the dark, for us to finally come looking. But before we go deeper, there is one thing you need to understand, because without it, nothing else that follows makes sense. Every creature you are about to encounter, every impossible body shape and extreme adaptation traces back to a single cause. Not temperature, not pressure. Something far more basic. Something you have relied on every waking moment of your life without ever considering it could simply stop. The answer is light. Specifically, what water does to it and how quickly. The process starts not at 200 meters, not at 1,000. It begins within the first 5 meters of the surface, and by the time it is finished, the ocean has stripped every wavelength of color from the visible spectrum and left nothing behind but permanent, absolute dark. What that darkness builds in the creatures living inside it is what the rest of this is about. Light is so constant at the surface that most people never stop to consider it as something that could simply end. On land, darkness is temporary. The sun sets, the sun rises, and the cycle resets without exception every 24 hours. Even in the ocean's upper layer, that same cycle holds. Sunlight hits the surface each morning, filters through the top column of water, and powers the plankton blooms that feed every creature above them in the food chain. The surface ocean is a photosynthesis engine running on solar energy, the same energy that drives forests and grasslands above the waterline. Fishermen work by it, coral reefs depend on it, and satellite systems map ocean health by measuring how much of it is reaching the surface plankton on any given day. The assumption built into all of this is straightforward. Light reaches the ocean, life uses the light, the system runs. That assumption holds, but only for the very top of the water column, a layer so thin it barely registers against the total depth of what lies beneath it. But the theft of light does not happen evenly, and that unevenness is what shapes every single creature below the surface. Red light, the weakest wavelength in the visible spectrum, is absorbed within the first 5 meters of water, not dimmed. Absorbed, physically converted into heat. At 10 meters, a bleeding wound would appear black because no red light exists in that environment to reflect off blood. Orange disappears by 20 meters, yellow by 30 to 40, and the spectrum narrows with each additional meter of depth, the water acting as a filter, stripping wavelengths in strict order from weakest to strongest. Blue survives the longest. Its shorter, more energetic wavelength lets it push deeper than any other color, but even blue cannot hold. Past 200 meters, the last trace of surface light is gone. Below that line, every animal that has ever lived there has done so in a darkness that has not changed in hundreds of millions of years, where there is no dawn, no seasonal variation, no flicker of surface light filtering down on a clear day. The darkness is not a condition, it is a permanent geological fact, as fixed as the pressure and the cold. Therefore, every bizarre creature you will encounter in the deep ocean is, at its core, a response to one thing: the absence of light. When red disappears at 5 meters, the first wave of adaptation begins. When blue finally dies past 200 meters, the second wave, far stranger, takes over entirely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis, which means no plants, which means no reliable food chain building from the bottom up. Every creature below 200 meters is living off scraps, dead particles drifting down from above, or hunting something, that is. The death of light doesn't just change what animals look like, it reshapes how they eat, how they hide, how they reproduce, and how long they live. It is the single most powerful evolutionary pressure on this planet, and most people never think about it. Before we go further, if this is the kind of content you want more of, hit subscribe now. It takes 1 second, and the next documentary will be waiting for you. Back to prehistoric Australia. So now you understand what light does, or rather, what it stops doing. The next question is what a creature does when the light it evolved around begins to fail. The answer, it turns out, is not one thing. At 200 meters, where blue light finally fades into nothing, evolution split into 2 completely opposite directions. And both of those directions are stranger than the words used to describe them suggest. Some creatures decided to become invisible. Others decided to become the light itself. The first animals you encounter in the twilight zone look less like biology and more like something removed from it entirely. Bodies that cameras pass straight through, organs floating in open water with no visible container around them, eyes that are the only proof anything is even there. The ocean between 200 and 1,000 meters is called the twilight zone, and for a long time, scientists treated it as a transitional space, not quite the surface world, not quite the deep, a grey area between the familiar and the unknown. The creatures documented in the sunlit layer above are colourful, visible, and built around light. Coral reef fish are yellow, blue, spotted, striped, colours that exist because light exists to bounce off them. Even open ocean predators like tuna are built for visibility, fast, counter-shaded, navigating by sight in well-lit water with clear sight lines stretching dozens of meters in every direction. At 200 meters, that logic starts breaking apart. Light is still technically present, but barely, fading from blue to a deep and sickly indigo, and the creatures living here have had to construct entirely new survival strategies around what little remains. Some of the first animals researchers encountered in the Twilight Zone looked, at first glance, like they simply weren't there, not camouflaged against a background, not hiding, just absent, even when the camera was pointing directly at them. But becoming invisible in an environment with no walls, no floor within range, and no surface to blend into is not a simple problem to solve. Camouflage on land requires a background, a leaf, a rock, a branch. The open water of the Twilight Zone offers nothing. An animal floating in mid-water has nothing to disappear against except the water itself, and water is transparent, which means a solid body of any color or pattern is immediately visible against it. Transparency was one answer, and it works, but only partially, because even a transparent body casts a shadow, and a shadow in the Twilight Zone is enough to get you killed. Bioluminescent counter-illumination solved the shadow problem for some species, allowing animals to emit light from their undersides at a brightness precisely calibrated to match the faint glow above, erasing the silhouette that would otherwise mark them. But producing that light costs energy. Every solution here has a cost, and energy in the twilight zone is the resource in shortest supply. Each adaptation that prey developed triggered a counter-adaptation in predators, and that escalation has been running without pause for hundreds of millions of years, producing designs that no surface environment ever forced anything to invent. Therefore, the Twilight Zone runs on one currency: visibility. The glass octopus made itself nearly invisible by eliminating pigment entirely, its organs barely present, its body like a ghost, shaped from water. The firefly squid took the opposite gamble, generating its own light, not to be seen, but to erase its own shadow against the faint glow above. Both strategies exist for the same brutal reason: anything that can be detected gets eaten. What's remarkable is that these are not primitive solutions. They are chemically complex, precisely calibrated, and in many cases, still not fully explained by science. The firefly squid adjusts its belly light in real time to match the exact brightness of the surface above it. That is not simple biology. That is an animal performing constant physical calculations every second of its life just to survive another night. The Twilight Zone is full of creatures that have mastered the problem of being seen. But something else is happening in this same layer. Something so large, so coordinated, and so consistent that it fooled the most advanced military technology on Earth for years. It has nothing to do with individual animals hiding from individual predators. It is a movement. The largest migration on Earth, in fact, bigger than anything that happens on land, bigger than anything in the sunlit ocean above, and almost completely invisible to anyone not specifically looking for it. It was discovered by accident during World War II by naval operators who thought they had found the ocean floor. What they had actually detected changed the way scientists understood the ocean's role in the food chain, the climate, and the basic metabolism of this planet. In the early 1940s, the United States Navy was running sonar operations across the Pacific as part of the war effort. Sonar was still relatively new, a technology built around a clean principle. Send a pulse of sound into the water, measure how long it takes to return, and calculate the distance to whatever it struck. If it hit a submarine, the Navy located the submarine. If it hit the ocean floor, the Navy recorded the depth. The operators were trained, the equipment was calibrated, the principle was solid. Then something began appearing on the instruments that made no sense. During daylight hours, the sonar would register a dense mass sitting at roughly 300 to 500 meters, a clear, consistent echo that looked exactly like the ocean floor. Every reading confirmed it. The instruments showed bottom. Charts were updated, the depth was logged, and the reading was repeated across dozens of separate operations spanning thousands of kilometers of open Pacific. At night, that floor would begin to rise, climbing toward the surface over several hours, before descending again at dawn. The Navy had no explanation for a seafloor that moved, but the mystery did not yield an explanation quickly. For years, naval operators watched the phantom floor complete its 24-hour cycle, rising at dusk, descending at dawn, without any satisfying account of what was causing it. Geologists confirmed the real seafloor was not moving. No known geological process could shift sediment hundreds of meters upward in hours and return it by sunrise. The readings were consistent across different ships, different instruments, and different sectors of the Pacific, ruling out equipment failure. When marine biologists were brought in, their early hypothesis was unusually dense schools of fish, but a school large enough to return that kind of sonar echo across that geographic spread would have to represent the largest single concentration of animal life ever recorded, an idea that seemed implausible right up until it turned out to be correct. What the sonar was bouncing off was not a school, it was a layer, a living carpet of organisms so dense and so geographically extensive that it reflected sound waves the way a solid surface would, fooling instruments specifically designed to detect solid surfaces. The planet had been running this migration every night for millions of years before human technology accidentally detected it, and only because that technology was pointed downward by people looking for submarines. Therefore, what the Navy thought was, the ocean floor was alive. The deep scattering layer, billions of lanternfish, squid, and krill, packed so tightly they reflected sonar like solid rock, was performing the largest migration on Earth every single night, completely invisible to anyone at the surface. Lanternfish alone account for an estimated 65% of all deep-sea fish biomass, meaning if you weighed every fish in the ocean, more than half that weight would belong to a creature most people have never heard of. They are also not just moving for food. When lanternfish eat at the surface and carry carbon back down into the abyss through excretion, they lock greenhouse gases into the deep ocean, making the stability of Earth's climate partly dependent on a finger-sized fish, making a nightly commute through the dark. That migration has run for millions of years. It took a world war for us to accidentally notice it. That migration moves through the twilight zone every night under cover of darkness, and the reason it works is that surface predators cannot see into it. But here is the problem. The predators that live permanently in the twilight zone did not evolve to hunt in well-lit water. They evolved specifically to hunt where photons are so scarce they can almost be counted individually, and an eye capable of detecting a single photon bouncing off a transparent body sees straight through the invisibility strategy. What that pressure produced is one of the most extreme arms races in biology. Eyes that occupy half a skull, lenses that rotate inside transparent domes, binocular vision designed to calculate striking distance in near total darkness. What you are about to learn about the barrel eye fish will make you reconsider what a face is actually for. Sight is so fundamental to how humans navigate the world that most people never think about how completely it depends on light. On land, an eye works because photons bounce off objects and enter the eye, where they are converted into signals the brain reads as an image. Take away the light and the eye becomes useless, not broken, just pointless, because there is nothing for it to do. This is not a design flaw. It is simply what eyes were built for. Environments where light existed reliably enough to make sight worth having in the first place. In the upper ocean, the same logic applies cleanly. Fish in coral reefs carry eyes on the sides of their heads to give them wide fields of view, watching for predators in water lit clearly enough to see across meaningful distances. The twilight zone breaks this logic almost immediately. Light at 200 meters is not just reduced, it is millions of times weaker than daylight. Present more as a faint conceptual trace than as anything that could be called illumination. And the gap between the top and bottom of the twilight zone, in terms of available light, is wider than most people can intuitively picture. But developing a more sensitive eye in the twilight zone creates an immediate problem. If a predator can detect a shadow against faint surface light, then that predator's own body, its own silhouette, is equally detectable to anything looking up from below. The arms race does not push predators toward better vision in isolation. Every improvement in predator optics simultaneously increases the selection pressure on prey to eliminate any visual profile that could be detected from beneath. Transparency helps, but transparent bodies still have opaque organs. The stomach, the liver, the heart, and those organs are visible against the faint light above. Bioluminescent counter-illumination helps, but it costs energy and requires precise calibration to avoid emitting too much or too little light. Some species evolved internal mirrors that scatter ambient light through the body, reducing organ contrast against surrounding water. None of these solutions are complete, and none of them stop the escalation. Every new detection method a predator lineage develops forces the corresponding prey population to respond, and every prey response creates a new vulnerability that the next predator generation learns to exploit. The barrel eye fish, with its rotating green eyes inside a transparent dome, is not a biological oddity. It is a single snapshot of a negotiation that has been running with compounding stakes since long before most land-based animal lineages existed. Therefore, the barrel eye fish solved a problem that stumped marine biologists for decades. How do you protect hypersensitive eyes while stealing food from the stinging tentacles of a siphonophore? The answer was a transparent, fluid-filled dome covering the entire top of its skull, armor built from clarity itself. For years, scientists assumed the two holes on its face were eyes. They were nostrils. The real eyes were floating inside the dome, glowing green, pointed straight up toward the faint, dying light above. In 2009, researchers captured live footage for the first time and watched those eyes rotate forward, locking onto prey. And the decade-long assumption that the fish had a rigid, fixed gaze collapsed instantly. The deep ocean didn't just push creatures to evolve sharper eyes, it pushed them to completely redesign what a face is for. The twilight zone ends at 1,000 meters. Below that, even the faintest trace of the surface world is gone. The creatures of the twilight zone, as strange as they are, still orbit around light, hiding from it, generating it, erasing their shadows against the last dying blue above them. Below 1,000 meters, that reference point disappears entirely. The midnight zone runs from 1,000 to 4,000 meters, and the creatures that evolved there did not adapt to scarce light. They adapted to none. Not a single photon, not a seasonal flicker, nothing. What that produced is a category of animal that does not resemble anything in the sunlit world. Hunters that never chase, predators that vanish under direct spotlights, and one species whose reproductive strategy effectively eliminates one of the two sexes from independent existence. 1 kilometer below the ocean surface does not sound dramatic on paper. It is a number, a measurement. 1,000 meters of water between you and everything your body recognizes as normal. But at that depth, the physical conditions stop resembling anything found on the surface of this planet. Temperature hovers just above freezing, a cold that does not change by season, by time of day, or by decade. Pressure sits at approximately 100 times what a person feels at sea level, enough to collapse most sealed containers and rupture unprotected tissue instantly. There is no light at all, not the faintest trace of the blue glow that dies through the twilight zone above, not a single photon reaching down from the surface world. Every environmental condition that surface biology depends on, warmth, light, manageable pressure, a functioning food supply, is either absent or functionally inverted here. The midnight zone stretches from 1,000 meters to 4,000, covering a volume of ocean larger than all of Earth's land surface combined. And, for most of scientific history, researchers assumed it held relatively little of biological interest. But the midnight zone does not simply make survival difficult. It restructures the underlying logic of predation in ways that have no equivalent above it. On land and in shallow water, predators chase. Speed, strength, and sight have dominated predation for most of evolutionary history, because in environments with sufficient food and energy, the return on a chase justifies the cost. In the midnight zone, that math breaks entirely. A dragonfish that actively pursues prey through open water burns more energy in the chase than a small meal can replenish, given how infrequently prey appears at that depth. What replaced pursuit was stillness, and what replaced speed was architecture. Ultra-black skin absorbs nearly all incoming light, making a fish invisible even when a submersible spotlight hits it directly. Bioluminescent lures draw prey toward the predator, collapsing the distance to zero before the predator moves at all. The anglerfish holds its lure in front of open jaws and waits, not for minutes, but for however long it takes, because in an environment where energy cannot be wasted, the most efficient predator is the one that has effectively stopped predating and started simply existing in front of its food. Therefore, in the midnight zone, the dragonfish doesn't just hunt, it hunts in a private wavelength. Red bioluminescence is invisible to nearly every other creature at that depth, which means the dragonfish carries a searchlight that only it can see. Its prey is lit up with no awareness it is being illuminated. The anglerfish male, meanwhile, has abandoned hunting entirely. Born without a functioning digestive system, his only biological purpose is to find a female before he starves to death. When he finds one, he bites into her skin, and his body begins to dissolve, blood vessels merging with hers, organs withering, until he becomes a permanently grafted reproductive structure on her side. Some females carry multiple males at once. Evolution looked at the problem of finding a mate in infinite darkness and decided the most efficient solution was to eliminate the independence of one participant entirely. The midnight zone forces evolution into radical new designs, new pressures demanding new solutions, biology pushed into shapes it had never tried before. But what happens in a place where nothing new is ever demanded? What happens when an environment is so unchanging, so perfectly consistent across tens of millions of years, that evolution looks at a creature's design and finds nothing left to improve? The answer is still down there, right now. Several answers, actually. Creatures that were already ancient when the first dinosaurs appeared. Unchanged in structure from fossils pulled out of rock dating back 125 million years. Still hunting with the same tools their ancestors used before the asteroid that ended the Cretaceous period ever reached the atmosphere. Evolution operates on a principle most people understand in broad strokes. Species change over time. Environments shift, pressures accumulate, and organisms that cannot adapt are replaced by ones that can. This has been the story of life on Earth for roughly 3.8 billion years, a continuous process of adjustment, modification, and replacement playing out across every habitat on the planet. Mass extinction events compressed this process dramatically. The asteroid that struck Earth 66 million years ago wiped out approximately 75% of all species alive at the time, erasing entire lineages and reshaping ecosystems from the ocean surface to the deepest land. Species that had held ecological dominance for tens of millions of years vanished within a geological instant. New species filled the cleared space, adapted to the changed conditions, and began their own evolutionary trajectories. The fossil record documents this pattern with consistency. Given enough time and enough environmental pressure, nothing stays the same. The logic is so well supported across so many different lineages and so many different extinction events that scientists treat it as close to a rule. The deep sea, it turns out, is the exception to that rule. But the deep sea operates outside the standard evolutionary process, not because evolution stopped applying there, but because the conditions that drive evolutionary change were never strong enough to make existing designs insufficient. On land, a species contends with shifting climates, new competitors, changing food sources, predator migrations, ice ages, and periodic extinction events that reset ecological hierarchies and open space for new lineages. The surface ocean experiences versions of the same disruptions, transmitted downward from the atmosphere and the food chain above. The deep sea absorbs almost none of them. Temperature at 2,000 meters has not meaningfully changed in millions of years. The pressure is constant. The darkness is total and has been total since long before the goblin shark's lineage first appeared. A goblin shark alive today is hunting in conditions that are, in every material way, identical to the conditions its ancestors occupied 125 million years ago. The same temperatures, the same pressures, the same prey types, the same absence of light. When an environment refuses to change, the organisms adapted to it have no reason to change either. The deep sea did not freeze these creatures in time. It simply gave them no reason to move on. Therefore, the goblin shark and the frilled shark are not evolutionary failures. They are proof that the deep sea is so stable, so unchanging in its conditions, that a design perfected 125 million years ago still works today without a single modification. The goblin shark fires its jaw forward, a second mouth launching out of its face, because floating motionless and ambushing is more efficient than chasing prey in a food-scarce environment. The frilled shark swallows prey half its own body size whole, using 300 teeth arranged in 25 rows, a design that has not changed in 80 million years. The coelacanth was declared extinct 66 million years ago, after the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs and turned up alive in 1938, pulled up by a fisherman off South Africa. The deep sea preserved these creatures not out of coincidence, but because the conditions down there never shifted enough to make them obsolete. The living fossils of the deep survived because their environment refused to change. Go deeper still, past 4,000 meters, and the environment becomes something stranger than anything above it. Not strange in the way the midnight zone is strange, where darkness forces creatures into new shapes. Strange in the way that time itself appears to operate differently. The abyssal plain is the largest habitat on Earth, covering more than half of the planet's total surface area, and almost nothing about it fits the biology you learned above the waterline. What lives there grows to sizes that should not be possible on the food supply available, survives without eating for years, without measurable decline, and in at least one documented case, lives long enough to outlast entire human civilizations without once surfacing to notice they existed. At 4 kilometers below the surface, the ocean floor flattens into something with no real equivalent anywhere else on Earth. It is not a trench, not a ridge system, not a field of underwater peaks. It is a plain, a vast, nearly featureless desert of fine sediment that extends in every direction for thousands of kilometers without a single natural landmark to break the monotony. The abyssal plain covers more than half of the total surface area of this planet, making it the largest single habitat on Earth by a significant margin, and almost nobody thinks about it. It is too deep for light to reach, too cold for any biology that relies on warmth, and too remote for the kind of regular sampling that builds a detailed scientific picture over time. The sediment on the abyssal floor is composed of billions of years' worth of particles that sank from the surface, microscopic shells, organic debris, mineral dust, drifting down through miles of water before settling silently at the bottom. Food arrives as occasional flakes of organic material, a supply so sparse and so irregular that the entire ecosystem built around it had to slow itself down to match. But the abyssal plain does not behave like a desert in any ecological sense that surface biology prepares you for. Land deserts are harsh and volatile. Temperature swings of 40 degrees between day and night, wind erosion, unpredictable rainfall. Conditions in the abyssal plain are the opposite, the most stable on Earth, almost completely unchanging across centuries. What the plain lacks is not stability, it lacks food. Marine snow, the slow drift of dead organic particles from the surface, arrives at the abyssal floor in quantities so small that the entire ecosystem had to calibrate itself downward to survive on them, slowing every biological process to a rate that appears almost impossible from a surface perspective. Giant isopods kept in aquariums have survived more than 4 years without food and shown no measurable physiological decline. The Greenland shark does not become sexually mature until it is approximately 150 years old. These are not examples of organisms barely holding on under stress. They are organisms that have matched every internal clock, metabolism, growth, reproduction, to an environment where energy arrives unpredictably, and burning it unnecessarily is a faster path to death than starvation. Patience in the abyss is not a behavior, it is a biological architecture. Therefore, the abyssal plain runs on a completely different clock. The Greenland shark does not reach sexual maturity until it is roughly 150 years old, and may live past 400, meaning every living Greenland shark is older than the United States. A single whale carcass sinking to the abyssal floor feeds an entire succession of ecosystems for decades, moving through waves of scavengers, then bone-eating Osedax worms that drill directly into skeleton to extract oils, then microbes breaking down what remains until nothing is left. Giant isopods, essentially pill bugs scaled to the size of a small dog, can go years without food and show no measurable deterioration. This is not a collection of extreme cases. It is simply how the abyss operates, slowly, without waste, where every death becomes a city and everybody is borrowed rather than lost. The abyssal plain runs on a different clock, a different scale, a different version of what survival means. But even the abyssal plain has a floor, and below that floor, the Earth pulls the ocean bottom downward into something else entirely: the trenches. Places where the seafloor drops away to depths that make the abyssal plain feel shallow by comparison. The Mariana Trench descends to nearly 11,000 meters. Pressure there runs to 1,100 times what you feel right now, in total darkness at temperatures just above freezing, with no food source that any surface biologist would classify as adequate. For most of scientific history, researchers assumed nothing meaningful could survive there. That assumption collapsed in a way that forced a complete rewrite, not just of what lives in the trenches, but of what the word habitable means at all. The oceanic trenches are not simply deep parts of the ocean. They are places where the structure of the planet itself pulls the seafloor downward, where one tectonic plate slides beneath another and the crust descends into the mantle, dragging the ocean bottom with it to depths that are almost impossible to picture at human scale. The Mariana Trench, located in the Western Pacific, is the deepest known point on Earth, a narrow scar in the seafloor reaching nearly 11,000 meters at its lowest point, a location called Challenger Deep. Pressure at Challenger Deep is approximately 1,100 times the pressure at sea level, a force so extreme that unprotected human tissue would compress in the same way a paper cup compresses under a boot. Fewer people have physically descended to that point than have walked on the surface of the moon. The trench is harder to reach, harder to survive, and harder to study than anywhere else on Earth. For most of scientific history, Challenger Deep was assumed to be essentially empty. The conditions were considered too hostile, the food supply too non-existent, and the pressure too catastrophic for anything resembling organized biology. But what pressure at 1,100 atmospheres actually does to living tissue is not what most people picture. It does not simply crush an organism from outside. It disrupts chemistry, cell membranes, which function by maintaining a specific balance between fluid inside and outside the cell, begin to malfunction under extreme pressure because the molecules forming those membranes compress at different rates than the surrounding fluid. Proteins, the molecular machines responsible for every biological function, begin folding incorrectly under pressure, losing their shape and with it their ability to work in a process called pressure denaturation. An organism built for surface conditions would not collapse dramatically at depth. Its biochemistry would simply stop working at the molecular level long before any structural failure occurred. For decades, this was the accepted ceiling for life, a pressure threshold beyond which the chemistry could not be maintained. When deep-rated instruments reached Challenger Deep in sufficient numbers to properly survey it, what they returned was not confirmation of an empty trench. The data forced a reconsideration so complete that the working definition of a habitable environment had to be rewritten, not updated, rewritten from the ground up. Therefore, the snailfish, translucent, boneless, gelatinous, is the deepest living fish ever recorded, thriving at nearly 8,000 meters, where pressure would collapse a human body in milliseconds. Its cells use a molecule called TMAO to keep proteins stable under crushing weight, a biochemical solution no surface creature has ever needed to develop. But the more disturbing discovery came from the amphipods living alongside it, plastic fibers inside their digestive tracts at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. We hadn't even fully mapped the trench when we found our own waste already present inside the organisms living there. The Hadal Zone was supposed to be the one place on Earth untouched by human activity. Instead, it confirmed there is no longer a place on this planet deep enough to be beyond the reach of what we throw away. What the trenches revealed about life's absolute limits did not stay inside oceanography. It migrated, slowly at first, then decisively, into a much larger question. If the requirements for life are not what we assumed, if sunlight and warmth and manageable pressure are not fixed conditions but negotiable ones, then the search for life beyond Earth has been working from the wrong definition. The conditions found in the Mariana Trench The crushing pressure, the near-freezing temperatures, the chemistry-driven energy sources with no sunlight involved are not unique to Earth. They exist right now, confirmed by space probes that have already returned data on at least 2 moons in our own solar system. What follows is not speculation. The deep ocean already ran the experiment. We are just now starting to read the results. The search for life beyond Earth has always rested on assumptions borrowed from the only example of life scientists have ever directly studied: life on Earth's surface. That life runs on sunlight. Plants absorb solar energy through photosynthesis and convert it into chemical energy that moves up through the food chain from insects to mammals, from plankton to whales. Sunlight, in this framework, is not merely useful, it is foundational, the original energy source that every living thing on Earth's surface traces back to when you follow the chain far enough. That assumption shaped decades of space exploration strategy. Scientists looking for habitable worlds focused on planets at the right distance from a star, close enough for liquid water, far enough from scorching heat. The Goldilocks zone became the shorthand for where life could plausibly exist, and NASA's planetary science program built enormous infrastructure around locating and studying planets that fell within it. The logic was clean, internally consistent, and backed by every example of life that science had ever encountered. Every example, that is, except for the ones living at the bottom of the ocean. But in 1977, a research submersible descending near the Galapagos Islands found something that fit no existing model of how ecosystems were supposed to work. On the seafloor, far beyond any reach of sunlight, clustered around cracks in the ocean crust, venting superheated water laced with hydrogen sulfide and heavy metals, were entire communities of organisms. Tube worms, meters long, crabs, clams, shrimp, thriving without photosynthesis at any level of the food chain. The energy source was not the sun. Microbes at the base of the community were oxidizing vent chemicals directly, converting geological heat into biological energy, forming the foundation of a complete ecosystem that had no connection to the surface world and no dependence on it. No sunlight, no photosynthesis, no borrowed energy from above. The discovery required a rewrite of the conditions considered necessary for life, not a revision, a rewrite. Because if life could run entirely on chemical energy in liquid water warmed by internal heat, then the Goldilocks zone around a star stopped being the only framework that mattered. Europa has a liquid ocean kept warm by Jupiter's tidal forces. Enceladus is actively venting water vapor with organic molecules into space. The deep ocean already demonstrated that these conditions are not just survivable, they are, for certain forms of life, optimal. Therefore, the hydrothermal vents of the deep ocean, where microbes feed on hydrogen sulfide and methane in water superheated to hundreds of degrees, with no sunlight involved at any step, are not just biological curiosities. They are proof that life does not require a star. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, holds a liquid ocean beneath a frozen crust, kept warm by gravitational tidal forces rather than solar energy, the same mechanism driving heat at deep-sea vents on Earth. Enceladus, orbiting Saturn, actively vents water vapor into space from a subsurface ocean, and scientists have already detected organic molecules and hydrogen inside that plume. The conditions are not merely similar to Earth's deep-sea vents, they are nearly identical. Every descent into the Hadal Zone is not just ocean science, it is a dry run for the moment we find biology somewhere else, And the deep sea has already made one thing clear. When we find it, it will be far stranger than we are prepared for. Tell me in the comments, which one actually surprised you? The barrel-eye fish with the rotating eyes inside its skull? Or the fact that the Navy thought 1 billion lanternfish were the ocean floor?